You spent how much at an estate sale? My brother's voice carried across the family reunion with the kind of judgment reserved for intervention moments. What he didn't know was that the junk I'd bought last week included a signed Tiffany lamp now authenticated at $340,000. But how do you explain investment-grade antiques to people who think you're one step away from a reality TV intervention? The Sullivan family reunion happened every July at my parents' lake house in the Adirondacks. 47 relatives gathered for 3 days of forced bonding and thinly veiled competition. I was the odd one out. Margot, 36, unmarried, no corporate job, living in what my family called that warehouse in Brooklyn filled with other people's trash. She spent $3,000 on old furniture, my brother Owen continued, addressing the picnic table like a prosecutor presenting evidence. He was a corporate attorney, 40 years old, everything I wasn't, married, successful, respectable. $3,000, Margot. On furniture from a dead person's house. The furniture in question was a complete set of 1780s Chippendale chairs. I'd had them authenticated 2 days ago. Current auction estimate, $280,000 for the set. But I just continued polishing the Georgian silver tea service I'd brought, testing how it would photograph for the Sotheby's catalog. It's not a business model, it's hoarding with a prettier name, Owen said, and several cousins laughed in agreement. My mother sighed. That particular sound she'd perfected over 36 years of dealing with her disappointing daughter. Margot, sweetheart, we're worried. You're living in that warehouse space, surrounded by old things, spending your savings on estate sales. When are you going to get a real job? A real job. My hobby had generated $8.7 million in revenue last year. This year's projections had me crossing $12 million. But explaining that would require explaining everything else. And I'd learned long ago that correcting their assumptions only led to longer lectures. I'm doing fine, I said quietly, buffing a spot on the teapot. You're not doing fine, my cousin Jessica said, her voice dripping with concern. She was a pediatrician, married to a successful architect, the kind of woman who had her life together. Margot, you're 36. You live in a warehouse. You spend all your money on junk. That's not fine, that's concerning. The warehouse was a 6,000-square-foot converted factory building in Dumbo that I'd purchased for $4.2 million 3 years ago. It housed my personal collection, my restoration workshop, and my private showroom where clients paid between $50,000 and $2 million for individual pieces. But they'd only visited once, walking through with barely concealed horror at all the clutter. What's your annual income? My Uncle Richard asked, the family patriarch who measured everyone's worth in tax brackets. Seriously, Margot, what do you pull in from this antique thing? 20,000? 30. Last year's personal income after expenses, $6.2 million. But I said nothing. That's what I thought, Uncle Richard continued, misinterpreting my silence. You can't even answer because you're embarrassed. Margot, you're a smart girl. You have a degree from Columbia. Why are you wasting it digging through dead people's houses? My degree in art history from Columbia had been extremely useful, actually. It's how I could authenticate pieces, understand provenance, recognize undervalued items that dealers overlooked. But explaining that would sound defensive. She's a glorified hoarder, my cousin Daniel said, laughing. I saw that show on TV. This is literally the beginning of that show. The table erupted in laughter. Good-natured, pitying laughter that made my chest tight. Maybe she could work at an auction house, my Aunt Linda suggested helpfully. Like in customer service or something. At least it would be steady income with benefits. I'd been offered the position of senior specialist at Christie's 2 years ago. $400,000 base salary plus commission. I'd turned it down because I made more in 3 months of independent dealing than I would in a year working for them. The problem, Owen said, settling into what I recognized as his courtroom voice, is that Margot has always valued things over people. Objects over relationships. She'd rather spend time with dead people's furniture than build a real life. I valued things because I understood them. Because I could see past surface damage to the beauty underneath. Because I knew that a $200 estate sale purchase could be a $50,000 treasure if you had the knowledge and patience. But explaining that to people who bought furniture at Pottery Barn seemed pointless. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I ignored it. It buzzed again, insistently. Margot, your phone, my mother said sharply. It's fine. It's clearly not fine, Owen said. Someone's trying to reach you. Probably another hoarder wanting to trade junk. The table laughed again. I pulled out my phone. The screen showed 6 missed calls, all from the same number. Helena Whitmore, Senior VP at Sotheby's, New York. My heart rate kicked up. We'd been in authentication and valuation for 3 months. My latest acquisition, an entire estate collection I'd purchased for $780,000, had turned out to be significantly more valuable than even I'd hoped. Pieces dating back to the 1600s. Museum-quality furniture. Documented provenance. But the final authentication had been delayed while experts verified some particularly rare items. "I need to take this," I said, standing. During the reunion, my mother's voice rose. "Margot, that's incredibly rude. We're having family time." "I'll be quick," I said, walking toward the dock where the noise wouldn't carry. I called Helena back. "Helena, I'm sorry I missed your calls." "Margot," her voice was vibrating with barely contained excitement. "Where have you been? I've been trying to reach you all morning." The authentication just came back on the final pieces from the Hartford estate. "Margot, we need to talk about the auction." The Hartford estate. I'd bought it from the family of a deceased collector. Everything from a 1790s mansion being demolished. Furniture, silver, paintings, decorative arts. The family had wanted it gone quickly and had accepted my offer of $780,000 for the entire contents. "What's the valuation?" I asked, my hands slightly shaking. "Margot, sit down. I'm standing on a dock." "What's the valuation?" Helena took a breath. "The Chippendale secretary you thought was period? It's not just period. It's documented as made for the Adams family. There are letters of provenance we found in a hidden compartment. Conservative auction estimate is $12 to $15 million alone." My legs went weak. 12 to 15 million. For one piece. That's conservative. If we get 2 serious bidders, it could go higher. And Margot, that's just the secretary. The complete collection, the furniture, the silver, the paintings, the Chinese export porcelain. We're estimating the entire auction at $89 million. I sat down hard on the dock. $89 million. I'd paid $780,000. Even after Sotheby's commission and expenses, my profit would be over $60 million. "The auction is scheduled for October," Helena continued. "We're planning a major international campaign. This is museum-quality material, Margot. We're expecting bidders from the Met, the V&A, the Getty, plus private collectors from around the world. This is going to be the most important American furniture auction in a decade." "Helena, my voice didn't sound like my own." "There's more," she said. "The New York Times wants to do a profile. Antiques Magazine wants a feature. And the Decorative Arts Society wants you to speak at their annual symposium. Margot, you're about to become the most talked-about antiques dealer in the country." We talked logistics for another 10 minutes, photography schedules, catalog preparation, marketing strategy. When I hung up, I sat on the dock staring at the lake, trying to process what had just happened. Through the trees, I could hear my family's laughter. Owen telling another story about my poor life choices. Someone asking when I'd finally grow up and get real job. I walked back to the picnic table slowly. They were serving dessert now, store-bought pie that my mother had plated carefully. I'd brought a dish too, a Georgian silver serving platter I'd been testing for the auction catalog. They'd used it without comment, not recognizing it was worth $45,000. "Everything okay?" my mother asked, though her tone suggested she assumed it wasn't. "Actually," I said, sitting down slowly, "that was Sotheby's. They finished authenticating the Hartford estate collection." The table went quiet. Owen looked up from his pie. "Sotheby's? The auction house?" "Yes. I acquired an estate collection 3 months ago. Complete contents of an 18th century mansion. They've been authenticating and valuing the pieces for auction." "How much did you pay for this collection?" Uncle Richard asked, his tone suggesting he expected an embarrassingly small number. $780,000. My mother gasped. "Margot, you spent our family's entire inheritance on old furniture." "No, I spent my own money. Money I earned from previous acquisitions and sales." Owen was staring at me. "You had $780,000 just sitting around?" "I had it in my business acquisition fund, yes." "What's it worth?" my cousin Jessica asked, her medical training making her focus on practical questions. "What's the auction estimate?" I took a breath. $89 million. The silence was profound. Someone's fork clattered against a plate. 89 million, Owen repeated slowly, as if testing whether the words made sense together. The collection includes documented pieces from the Adams family, authenticated Chinese export porcelain from the 1700s, a complete set of Chippendale furniture, Georgian silver, and several important American paintings. Sotheby's is calling it the most significant American furniture auction in a decade. My Uncle Richard had gone pale. You're telling me you turned $780,000 into $89 million? After commission and expenses, my net profit will be approximately $60 to $65 million, yes. My mother's hand went to her throat. Margot, that's not possible. I pulled out my phone and opened the email from Helena. The preliminary auction catalog with estimated values. Page after page of items, each with 6 or 7-figure estimates. I turned the screen so they could see. Owen grabbed my phone, scrolling frantically. This secretary, it says estimate $12 to $15 million. It's documented as made for the Addams family. There are letters of provenance. These chairs, $280,000 for a set? Chippendale. Original finish. Documented provenance. Jessica was reading over Owen's shoulder. Margot, this catalog lists you as Margot Sullivan, noted antiques specialist and dealer. You're noted. I've been dealing independently for 12 years. I specialize in American and European furniture from 1650 to 1850, with a focus on documented provenance and museum-quality pieces. 12 years, my mother whispered. You've been doing this for 12 years? Yes. I left my job at the museum to deal independently when I was 24. What museum? Uncle Richard demanded. The Metropolitan Museum of Art. I was a junior curator in the American wing. But I realized I could make more money dealing independently than I could on a curator's salary. Owen was still scrolling, his face cycling through shock and disbelief. There are dozens of items here. Hundreds of thousands of dollars in estimates. Margot, what's your annual income from this? Last year was $8.7 million in revenue. After expenses, about $6.2 million in personal income. This year will be higher because of the Hartford auction. The picnic table had gone completely silent except for the sound of Owen scrolling through my phone. $6.2 million, my cousin Daniel said faintly. The hoarder made $6 million. I'm not a hoarder, I said quietly. I'm an antique specialist. I identify undervalued pieces, authenticate them, restore them when necessary, and sell them to collectors and institutions. Last year, I sold a Philadelphia tall case clock to the Winterthur Museum for $1.2 million. The year before, a Newport desk to a private collector for $2.8 million. I've sold pieces to the Met, the Museum of Fine Arts Boston, Winterthur, and the Yale University Art Gallery. My Aunt Linda was staring at me like I'd sprouted wings. The warehouse in Brooklyn is a 6,000-square-foot converted factory building I purchased for $4.2 million 3 years ago. It houses my personal collection, which is currently valued at approximately $18 million, my restoration workshop, and my private showroom where I meet with clients. Clients, Owen repeated numbly. Museum curators, private collectors, interior designers working with ultra-high net worth individuals. I don't advertise. All my business comes through referrals and reputation. Jessica found her voice. The $3,000 you spent at that estate sale was for a complete set of authenticated Chippendale chairs now valued at $280,000. Which is actually a fairly typical return on investment for my acquisitions. The silence stretched. My mother was crying now, though I wasn't sure if it was from shock or shame. Why didn't you tell us? Owen asked, and for the first time in my life, he sounded uncertain instead of judgmental. I tried, I said simply. 8 years ago, I invited you all to a talk I gave at the Decorative Arts Society. You were too busy. 5 years ago, I sold my first piece to the Met for over $1 million. I called to share the news. Mom said that's nice and asked when I'd get a real job. 3 years ago, Antiques magazine did a feature on me. I sent you the article. No one mentioned reading it. The words landed like stones. You all decided, I continued, that because I bought things at estate sales and lived in a warehouse, I must be failing. You saw old furniture and thought junk. You saw my passion and called it hoarding. You never once asked about my income, my clients, my success. You just assumed I was the family embarrassment and treated me accordingly. That's not fair, Owen started, but his voice was weak. Isn't it? You literally just called me a glorified hoarder 20 minutes ago. You said I valued objects over people. You've spent 12 years treating my career like a mental health crisis. My father, who'd been silent through the entire meal, finally spoke. Margot, I think we owe you an apology. A significant one. Yes, I agreed. You do. Can we start over? My mother asked, wiping her eyes. Can we please actually understand what you do? I looked at my family, at their shocked faces and guilty eyes, and I felt something shift. Not quite forgiveness, but possibility. The Sotheby's auction is October 14th, I said. It'll be open to the public during the preview days. If you want to see what I actually do, what these pieces really are, you're welcome to come. I'll be there for the specialist talks and the auction itself. We'll be there, my father said firmly. All of us. I stood, gathering my things. But right now, I need to go. I have a meeting with Sotheby's tomorrow morning to finalize the catalog, and Helena wants me to review the marketing strategy. At the car, I turned back. They were all standing now, clustered around the picnic table, looking lost. For what it's worth, I said, I never needed you to understand antiques. But I needed you to respect that I was building something real. That every piece I bought, every auction I attended, every hour I spent researching provenance, it all mattered. It all added up to this. The drive back to Brooklyn felt different. Lighter. By the time I reached my warehouse, my phone had 43 notifications. Messages from dealers, curators, collectors who'd heard about the Hartford auction. And 12 messages from my family. All variations of, "We're so sorry. We had no idea. We're so proud." I read them in my showroom, surrounded by centuries of craftsmanship, and smiled. They'd finally seen it. Better late than never.